Wow, lag I'm getting here. Okay. Hello everybody and welcome to another build video. Haven't done one of these for a while because, to be honest, I thought I was sort of done with a lot I had to say about Elementalist. But over the past couple of months, people have been like slowly more and more saying, hey, is that old build you put out still the thing you run? Is it still the thing you run? Is it still the thing you run? And for a long time I was kind of thinking to myself, well, yeah, I still got sort of function under the same principles. But actually, now that I think about it, I do run very different stuff on Elementalist now. I wanted to share that with you guys, talk about where I feel Elementalist really works from a PvE perspective only here. My PvP builds are completely different and I'll talk about those later. But I wanted to talk about all the changes I've made to the way I'm playing the game. And a lot of this is based on the kind of content I do while I'm in PvE. And I'll explain that as I go. But basically, I'm on totally different weapons now than what I last talked about. It's funny because in the last video I was, I believe, still on Dagger Dagger, and I'm not running Dagger Dagger at all, really. Despite the fact I did just get a legendary dagger, I'm not really finding much use for it, when I'm in group content, at least. You will still find me running a dagger when I'm, like, roaming around the world, but I'll get into that in a second. So, the reason why, first of all, let's have a look at my gear, shall we? The reason why I kind of felt like, oh, hey, my build hasn't changed too much is because the core principles behind how my gear works is almost the same. I'm still building very high power, very high crit damage, as high as you can get. I believe 108% crit damage bonus is the highest, like, natural crit damage bonus you can have on Elementalist at the moment. The way I've achieved that is I've got, in terms of accessories, I've got fully ascended Cavalier's stuff, which is power and crit damage with toughness on there, and a load of agony resist as well. I suppose you can go a little bit more power if you want, but I've got all agony resistance because I'm playing a lot of fractals. And the back piece itself is Zerka, but hey, it's all power, crit damage accessories with a little bit of toughness thrown in there. And over on my armor, I've got Valkyries, which again is power and crit damage right out of the ass, but also a little bit of vitality on there. As for runes, I go with Runes of the Scholar. I just feel they work quite nicely on Elementalist, and although I'm not running the trait right now, they have some nice synergy with one of the water magic traits in the game, which gives you basically the exact same thing as Scholar does on that tier 6 bonus, that 10% damage while health is above 90%. You kind of get to double up as Elementalist. So that's why I'm on Scholar. Other stuff is viable. You can like stack rubies if you want. A lot of warriors that run Zerka at the moment are stacking rubies, or you can go with Runes of the Divinity. Basically anything that gives you a lot of power and crit damage. So let's have a look at my traits, because my traits now are quite different. They're a lot more offensive, and I've got several reasons for why I've ended up going down this route. And let's basically have a look. Oh, I am running the trait. I thought I wasn't running it. Okay, so first of all, I'm 10 in water magic. What I just described about the scholar runes and how they stack up with this trait here, vital striking. I'm still doing that. So I go 10 into water magic, a little bit of healing power, 1,000 health, and I also deal extra damage when my health's above 90%. So when I'm wearing scholar at the same time, I'm doing 20% more damage as soon as we engage on a fight. And as long as I don't take many hits, then I should be fine. PvE, especially when you get to higher level fractals or specific dungeons and you're running kind of glassy specs on your character, the second you take damage anyway is doing you in for loads of your health. Elementalist, as I explained in a recent PvP video of mine, is the lowest armor class, lowest base vitality class in the game. You take tons of damage if you get hit, right? I feel like in PvE, since that's a fact you're going to have to deal with anyway, you may as well just go for these traits and then just make sure you hit people just as you heal yourself up to 100%. So I'm still above 90% there, and I get the full benefit of those two traits. So I'm 10 in water. That's a pretty basic way to start. Now, a big difference, though, is I'm now 30 in air magic. This was not something that was very viable until quite recently, when a very cool new trait was added to the game. The old Grandmaster traits, so the Grandmaster traits, obviously the final tier traits that you can choose to take if you like, and are supposed to be quite powerful. The old Air Magic Grandmaster traits weren't too good. We had two of them. We had one that meant if you were CC'd, you would get a shocking aura around you, and that's the same ability you get on Dagger main hand, which means if somebody attacks you while that shocking aura is up, they get stunned. PvE, that's incredibly limited in its use because there's tons of Defiant running around. And further, the trait was kind of bad because it was on a 90-second cooldown. It was on a huge cooldown. So that Grandmaster was terrible. The other Grandmaster that was available in Air Magic allowed you to do 20% more damage to stunned or knocked down foes. However, I believe that trait was, and maybe still is, bugged in that it wouldn't trigger unless it was like CC you had landed yourself, or there was something weird going on with that. So it was limited in its use. If you had like a friend like a CC warrior, or you know, someone that could really lay down a lot of stuns and knockdowns and blowouts, then yeah, that could have been a really good trait to pick, and I did play with it every now and then. I tried some interesting stuff with like trying to updraft people and then land a Phoenix on them while they're still CC'd, and you can do that, but it wasn't really that viable. So what ArenaNet did was they merged the two Grandmasters that used to exist together into what is now called Tempest Defense, which was the name of just one of them before. And not only did that make this trait kind of viable, still it's not that amazing, they dropped the cooldown as well on the Shocking Aura to just 60 seconds, though I still feel like it's sort of useless. Not only did that make this trait kind of viable, but it opened up the space for a new trait, a completely new trait. I wish I wasn't stood here getting attacked constantly. This is ridiculous. The new trait is called Fresh Air, and it's very interesting. It opens up some cool new different ways to play the game on Elementalist. What it means is when you score a critical hit, and don't forget air magic is buffing your precision and crit damage, so it's got synergy within itself. When you score a critical hit, it recharges your air attunement. So if you look here, I cycle out of air attunement. I should be on a 13-second cooldown here, but if I hit this guy and crit him, it recharges instantly, so I can go back in. Now, why this is strong is because to get to 30, you have to go through the 15 trait, this one here called Electric Discharge. This trait strikes your target with a bolt of lightning when attuning to air, and it's probably the strongest version of this trait you get. See, there's always a trait on each of these lines that does damage when you swap to that attunement. For fire, for example, you get Sunspot, which is inflict damage at your location when you attune to fire. Now, Sunspot is AoE, but people have to be stood right next to you, and it's not particularly amazing damage. For Earth, it's even lower damage, but it adds a little bit of a cripple, and again, it's AoE around you. The air one's really strong because it's got 900 range, and it will hit whoever you're targeting, like for quite a hard crit as well. So it's already a very strong trait, the 15, and by combining that with Fresh Air, what I can do is we'll have to wait for my cooldown to come off to get the full effect here, but we're going to hit this scale, and I'll show you guys how strong Fresh Air can be. As soon as my cooldown's back down. There we go, that didn't take too long. So I'm going to hit the scale. I'm going to go into air attunement, which strikes him with a bolt of lightning. Then I'm going to go into water attunement. And then I'm going to hit him with another ability and hopefully not kill him with it. And it will crit him again, and I can go back into air attunement, and I can spike him like quite heavily. Now, I did that really slowly to demonstrate to you guys what was actually happening on my skill bar, but I'll show you here again. I hate Dagger. I hate Dagger now. Oh my god. I can't wait to tell you guys why I hate Dagger. I also need to get out of the water, so I stop like, messing all of this up. Okay, so I can go into air, and then, well, they're dying too quick, but you get the picture. You can keep rolling into air attunement. While, if you're on 100% health, typically on an Elementalist, you don't really want to go into water magic because that's not going to give you too much extra damage necessarily. But now with Fresh Air, you can use that water magic cooldown to cycle back into air and get another bolt of lightning. Now, something very interesting about Fresh Air. It's actually not that strong on Dagger. Fresh Air has tons of synergy on Scepter, and this is one of the big reasons why I've swapped over to Scepter. So let's equip my Scepter. That's one of the daggers gone, and I'm going to explain why the other dagger's gone as well soon. So we're now on Scepter. This is basically what I run on Elementalist most of the time in PvE now. Reason number one for that is Fresh Air, and I'll show you guys. Because what I can do in Fresh Air is, okay, so let's say I've just hit this scale here. Right, so we're just gonna hit him with a Scepter ability. Now I'm gonna come out of the attunement. Now, what I want to do is crit him again, but I'm in water magic, and that might be kind of annoying. But Scepter on Dagger, it is quite annoying, very annoying, especially in Earth as well. But on Scepter, what you can do is, the skill 1 on Scepter is this long channel attack, this long, like, binding electric attack here. Now, what you can do with this is this attack will crit quite frequently, and it will continue to channel even after you've swapped out of the attunement. So, Scepter is very strong because I can start channeling this ability, go into Earth Attunement, and now that's going to proc another crit for me easily without spending any cooldowns. So you can just literally dart in and out of my attunements. Look at my skill bar here. It didn't work there because I didn't crit in time. But you can dart in and out just by channeling Arc Lightning. This ability is really strong for Fresh Air. Not to mention the fact that Scepter itself, the skill 2, is an exact duplicate of that trait I was talking about, the 15 air magic trait. It's the same thing here. So you can strike him with a bolt of lightning, start channeling Arc Lightning, then go back in, and then go into your air attunement, into your Earth attunement, and then wait for the crit to go through, and then go back in, and just keep cycling through. And here I wasn't even using fire attunement, but I managed to get a reasonable amount of sustained DPS out. Now, that's the thing about Scepter, okay? Scepter, a friend of mine in PvE put it this way a while ago. I think she kind of explained it quite well. Scepter sort of has a lot more finesse than Dagger. Dagger main hand, I kind of look at as very much a bruiser kind of weapon. You have all these cooldowns. There's not too much you really need to think about them. The worst cooldown really for Dagger main hand is burning speed. You just need to make sure you land it and not fly past people like I just did. All of the other ones, it's just kind of cycle through your achievements and just sort of hammer your cooldowns. You need to just use all of your cooldowns and make sure nothing's waiting around, right? And that's kind of how Dagger's played. You're constantly in the enemy's face and you're just like hammering your skills. First of all, it has a range disadvantage. When you're in really difficult stuff, you're going to be getting killed a lot because you're up there melee on such a squishy character. So you kind of have to build a little bit more defensively just to work with Dagger in the first place. But that's kind of how Dagger works. It doesn't have particularly high spikes, Dagger main hand. The highest spike it's really got is here on your burning speed, which again you can miss pretty easily. You can hit pretty easily as well, but you know, it's a factor to consider. I only killed that guy so quick there because I used my my utilities. So, but Scepter is, first of all, you've got more of a range advantage. You can do all of your damage on Scepter, sort of regardless of how close to the enemy you're stood. Some traits will change that. If you go 10 into Earth Magic, then you want to be stood a little bit closer. But still, you can do a lot of your damage from quite far away. Scepter also has much higher spike, and when it's on cooldown, you do a lot less damage than Dagger. Dagger's sort of a lot of sustained damage quite frequently, right? But it doesn't have particularly high spikes. Scepter has very strong spikes if you land all of your skills correctly, but then kind of you're not doing much sustained damage after that. Or, usually it would be that way. With Fresh Air, it kind of alleviates that issue a little bit. With Fresh Air, you can do your massive fire spikes using Dragon's Tooth and Phoenix, and then as soon as you come out of those spikes, well, I've just missed that one, but as soon as you come out, you can then use all your other achievement cooldowns to just be spiking them in air. And by doing that, it makes Scepter a lot more of a balanced weapon. It has higher spikes and almost, if not more, sustain than Daggers, just by virtue of the fact you can be stood further away, you've always got your Scholar Runes procced, and you've always got your Water trait procced, and you can just continue to slam enemies. Phoenix itself is probably the strongest ability. A lot of people mistakenly think Dragon's Tooth is the stronger ability. Phoenix is like an incredible skill. I love Phoenix. It's probably my favorite skill in the game at this point, right? Because what you can do is you can place the Phoenix just behind the target. It will tick damage for them. Well, that's not going to hit them there, but it will tick damage for them as they go through. It will tick damage on them as they get hit by the explosion for much higher damage, and then it will tick damage on them when they come back. So if you land your Phoenixes correctly, you hit someone 3 times very, very fast, and if all of those things crit, it does tons of damage. And of course in PvE you can line up a Dragon's Tooth alongside that. So let's have a look at my traits again, and I'll talk about some other stuff. So because I've gone 13 to Air Magic, before I was 30 Arcane, if you remember, or I demonstrated that one version of the build could be 30 Arcane. I don't bother with that at all anymore. The reason why a lot of Elementalists you'll find are running Evasive Arcana, particularly on Dagger Dagger setups, is mainly for the Water Magic, because in Water Magic with this trait on, if you dodge roll in water, you get like a nice splash heal that cleanses conditions. However, because we're no longer always in the enemy's face, I feel like you don't really need it so much. You could go 20 Arcane in theory, because then you can take this trait which reduces the cooldowns of Arcane abilities, wherever it is. I think it's number 1. Yeah, there you go. So if you're running a lot of Arcane utilities, you can potentially take that trait, but generally I don't run too far into this line. I always run at least 10 into Arcane, because Elemental Attunement is incredibly strong. It's a lot of really nice utility, not just for you, but for the whole team. Swiftness for the whole team, protection for the whole team. Protection is underrated, I think, by a lot of players. 33% less damage is significant, and regeneration as well. You know, these are nice things. They're just quality of life things that I feel like are kind of essential to be an Ellie. So I nearly always run at least 10. If I don't want to run 10, I will always run 5. 5 gives you Fury when you swap attunement. What were we just talking about with Fresh Air? That I'm swapping attunement a lot, right? So if you have a look at my Fury, as long as I continue to crit, which I'm not, and again I'll explain in a second, you can basically, in real fights, you can maintain Fury. You can just maintain it because you're constantly swapping around, and that's very strong. So that leaves me with 30 more points. I can't believe I'm doing this whole video here with just scale attacking me. That leaves me with 30 more points. As I've explained, I put 10 into Water Magic, and the other 20 I put up into Fire. Fire is incredibly strong, honestly. There's no good Grandmasters in Fire. There really aren't, so I wouldn't bother going 30. You might see me running 25 for an extra 5% damage to burning foes, and that's when I'd only go 5 in Arcane. But in general, I feel like this is the more balanced setup. Fire is strong. A lot of people underappreciate how how powerful just raw power is in this game. It is strong. Condition duration we don't really get much benefit of. The traits I choose specifically here are 10% more damage while attuned to fire, and my fire weapon skills recharge 20% faster. The reason I do that is because if I'm in fire attunement and I use a Phoenix on someone, say this Ridgeback scale, I use a Phoenix, and then I swap out a fire attunement. He's almost dead. Okay, we could just kill him there. And now my fire attunement is on a specific cooldown. It's on like 12 seconds or something like that, 15 seconds. Now with that fire cooldown trait, the second I swap back to it, my Phoenix is almost ready to go, and it would be ready to go if I'd stayed to use any other skills there. So the combination of a little bit of attunement recharge reduction in Arcane and the 20% fire weapon skills recharge, they sort of match up perfectly. It means every time I see my fire attunements up, I know my strongest nuke ability is also up. So that's why I run that. You can, if you want like, to just see bigger numbers, I guess you can run some other stuff. You can run maybe the extra extra damage against burning foes again, and maybe you could stack those two together with burning rage. You can do it if you want. There's not too much though that's particularly amazing in the fire line in terms of actual traits. That's why you still probably won't see too many people running in there. I don't often use enough cantrips to warrant the Spellslinger one either. So yeah, that's basically what I'm running for my traits and why. The main difference is essentially that I've just come out of this Evasive Arcana because I don't need the sustain anymore of that dodge heal. However, that's not just because I'm now running a Scepter and I've got more range. You will still take a lot of damage. And the solution to that is I've got rid of my Dagger offhand. Now, as I said at the start of the video, if I'm just roaming around Tyria, just having fun, I'll still be on Dagger offhand because Ride the Lightning is very strong. Dagger offhand is such a powerful weapon. It's unbelievable. Every single attunement has incredibly powerful skills. Ring of Fire, Fire Grab, one of our highest base damage attacks. Frost Aura, 10% reduced damage coming in and chills going out to people, and you can share that and you can trait for that to have extra stuff. A big heal and a Condi cleanse. Ride the Lightning and Updraft, so strong, and Earthquake and Churning Earth, our other highest base damage attack with massive bleed stacks on there too. It's such a strong ability, Dagger offhand, very, very powerful. However, I have got rid of that. If I am running higher fractals, now I'm not going to say I run super high end fractals because I've just never really bothered with that. I've almost got my 500 fractals complete, but I've just not really gone up the scale that much. At the moment, I'm at like 26, and I'm continuing to rise up, but I'm already seeing how strong focus can be. When you run this really difficult stuff, or if you want to run really glassy equipment, focus is very strong for just building in some intrinsic defense that just keeps you alive. Focus is something I've never really talked about or looked at much on my channel, and I really want to take the opportunity here because it's an interesting weapon. It's a very fun weapon as well. I have a lot of fun on Focus. Focus, essentially, at its core, is a very defensive weapon, right? So let's have a look. I want to show you guys the skills first of all, just because I've never really talked about it before, and I'll explain. You'll see as I go through. I'm going to talk about how bad this is in a second, but you'll see why it is very, very strong. So first of all, let's look at the focus skills and fire. Right, it's competing with Ring of Fire, which is a high base damage attack. Inflicts burning, is a great fire field. It's replacing that with Flame Wall. Flame Wall is terrible. It's incredibly low base damage. It's really finicky to actually hit any enemies with. It will barely tick anything up. I should have used this on this crab to show you guys. It does mediocre damage. It just lasts a while. It lasts 8 seconds instead of like 6 seconds, right? It's a terrible ability. It's a really bad ability. I've got a lot of ideas about how they can improve this, and maybe I'll talk about that at some point. But yeah, it's terrible. Basically, it doesn't exist, okay? That's the kind of damage you're getting off of that, right? Even if you're on a Condi build, it's just not going to work. The skill 5 is even worse in fire. This just gives you a fire shield. That's it. That's all that skill 5 gives you. It's your skill 5. It's supposed to be a strong cooldown, right? Well, no, it's terrible. Even if you're running aura sharing, this is still pretty terrible. A fire shield anyone can get just by laying down a field and then just leaping through it. On any class that doesn't cost like a full ability on your weapons, like at all. So basically fire is terrible. Compared to Dagger offhand, fire is really bad. And I'm not going to hide from that. So let's have a look at water. Maybe water's better, right? Well, no. Water is competing with the Frost Aura and is competing with Cleansing Wave. Two abilities on Dagger offhand, which I should point out, are incredibly defensive. Focus is meant to be a defensive weapon, right? Well, actually, for some bizarre reason, ArenaNet put more offensive abilities on Focus offhand than they did on Dagger offhand. I don't know why. I feel like maybe at some point they just accidentally swapped these up or mixed these up. The Dagger offhand abilities make way more sense on Focus than they do on the Dagger. But there you go, that's what they did. The skill 4 is a 900 range chill that lasts for 3 seconds and is on a 25-second cooldown. Again, a terrible ability. You can get chill in a million other ways that lasts way longer and is on a way shorter cooldown. Like, it's awful. But I think that ability makes sense on a dagger, doesn't it? Because dagger is a weapon about being up close. This is a nice little bit of CC to enable you to get close, and it makes sense on a dagger. Why is it here on focus when the really defensive, you know, 10% reduced damage cooldown is on dagger? I feel like those two skills, the skill 4, should be swapped. I really do. Anyway, so basically this isn't very good, and I very rarely, if ever, use it. Comet. Comet is a finicky skill that is a blast finisher that you're not really going to be able to line up as a blast finisher very easily. I mean, you can lay a flame wall down on an enemy and then try and cast Comet on them as you aggro them, but you're not going to get the benefit necessarily of that fire field unless you walk right up to the enemy. But basically, it's a delayed daze. It's not even a stun, it's a daze. It's AoE, but it's got terrible radius. So we've got 2 crabs here. It'd be nice to be able to daze them both, right? And I could see the merits of that on a defensive weapon, but it's a really bad radius. You're not going to get many AoE dazes off on people like that. And as you can see, it's already run out. It's on a delay. It's difficult to use. It's not an amazing ability either. So that's 2 achievements on focus that are just terrible, okay? Like, and they're not good, and I'm not going to pretend that they're good. But why the hell am I running it? So this is where it gets good. Air attunement. What it's competing with here is Ride the Lightning and Updraft. Now, for group content, Ride the Lightning is awesome for roaming around the world, but for group content, there isn't much virtue, unless you're like in super speed clear mode and everybody's roaming really quickly, there isn't much virtue in you riding the Lightning off way ahead of everyone, because, especially if you're playing on a glassy Elementalist, you're just going to have to wait for them anyway. It's fun, and I love having high mobility, but when you really get down to the brass tacks of it, it's not 100% necessary. Equally, in PvE, I don't find that I have to kite away and break combat that often. Like in PvE, you're either okay, or if you're going to drop, people can get you up pretty quickly. I don't often find myself drawn to the idea of just fleeing miles and miles and miles away, using Ride the Lightning and then coming back. So Ride the Lightning, though, it's a great skill. It's not actually that amazing in group content. It's also competing with Updraft. Updraft is a strong ability, and it's nice because it's an evade that you can have at hand even if you're immobilized. But it's also not that good for its CC effect because you have to be in melee range to land it, and its effectiveness is often diminished by things like Defiant, right? So Updraft, again, is a nice ability, and it's a nice bit of swiftness for you, again, mobility, but it's not actually that amazing when you come down to it. Updraft has been replaced by Gale. Gale, again, is just a knockdown. This time it's only single target, but it is at 900 range, and this will CC some things that are meant to be immune to CC, which is pretty cool. But so basically, Gale it's like a ranged Updraft, but only single target. And this is actually very strong, at least for your Phoenix combo. As I said, on Scepter, you can do a lot of damage from range. Now, with Gale, you can actually, on focus, you can line that up much better. There's no way he's gonna avoid that Phoenix I just laid at him, because I've CC'd him and knocked him down for 2 seconds. And all from massive range. If you dagger offhand, you're going to have to Ride the Lightning in and land an Updraft or something, put yourself in harm's way. The Gale combo is very strong for just landing that very, very quickly. Now, Ride the Lightning has been replaced with Swirling Winds. This is probably... I just said Phoenix was my favourite skill. Phoenix is a complicated skill, and it's kind of fun because, you know, it removes conditions, it's a blast finisher, it's got all of these little quirks to it. Swirling Winds is so fun. This is Swirling Winds, okay? It's on a long cooldown, but what it does is, actually it's not even on that long of a cooldown, I'll talk about that in a second. What it does is it lays down this massive field. It's not a combo field, it doesn't graft, I always feel like this should grant swiftness, to be honest, but it doesn't. It's just a massive field that all of you and your allies can stand in. Now the description is that this destroys projectiles. If you can't immediately see the merits of that, I'll give you a couple of examples of how strong this is, particularly, like, I'll give you with a fractal mindset, but projectiles are everywhere in PvE. They're all over the place. As you scale higher and higher into fractals, it essentially gets to a point where if the enemy hits you, it's sort of going to one-shot you regardless of what's happening. Now, by destroying all these projectiles, you can nullify a lot of very powerful attacks that are coming at you. Think about the Dredge fractal, for example. Most of those Dredge are using their sonic weapons and attacking you from range. This essentially means for 6 seconds, you and everyone stood inside the Swirling Winds are invulnerable, regardless of how many Dredge there are, and there are a lot of dredge. If you think about just after you've done the bit with all of the gates and you get and the path can split left or right, and you've got the bit where you have to channel the guns at the door, you can drop a Swirling Winds when just tons of dredge come out all over the place. Everyone can stand in it and just deal insane DPS to the dredge with no worry of being hit at all. At the end of that path as well, if you get the big mechanical dredge boss, one of his key attacks that usually downs people that aren't really sure what they're doing is he fires all of these massive bombs out. Like, he stands still and then he triggers it and the bombs go out and then they'll one-shot you. But Swirling Winds enables you to, every time he comes off of cooldown, the boss, to use that attack, you can stand next to him and use Swirling Winds so that the boss is inside the Swirling Winds and all of his bombs just get immediately dissipated. They just disappear and he won't throw a single one out. So as long as you, the Elementalist, are stood on this enemy that's firing the projectiles out, you've essentially granted immunity from all of that damage to your entire team. It's very strong on certain bosses. The Moss Heart is another really powerful one for that. The Moss Heart stops every now and then and he shakes and he spits all of these big fields out that drop down all these red AoE circles. Again, you can just stand next to him and just use Swirling Winds when it comes off of cooldowns, just as you see he's using that, and suddenly he's doing no damage. Another particularly difficult one in the Grawl Fractal, if you think about that with the big fire elemental, when you get into certain thresholds of health, he's going to bring a big shield on himself and start blocking all the time, and at that moment he summons a million tar elementals, and those things just spit little projectiles at you that constantly immobilize you and do a fair chunk of damage when you're getting hit by enough. All you have to do is, as soon as you see that shield go up, you just drop a Swirling Aura, either on your teammates or around the tar elementals themselves, and this is a big field. You can catch a lot of tar elementals in this, and suddenly they're doing no damage for a pretty reasonable length of time. When we're talking about really high scale stuff where each of those attacks is going to do anyone in for just tons of their health, that's when this becomes really strong. You're mitigating incredible amounts of damage. So if nobody's ever played with projectile reflection, then I know a lot of other classes have got interesting ways of doing it, Guardians in particular with their walls and stuff, but if nobody really understood the merits of it, hopefully I've given you a bit of an idea. Like, think of the Harpies as well, like knocking people off all the time. You can just drop a Swirling Winds and just disable all of their projectiles coming in. It's fantastic. Okay, so that's air. Air is something very strong. It makes up almost alone for me both of the crappiness of fire and water. Now let's have a look at Earth Attunement. This one's also very strong. The skill 4. This is first of all, this is a bit like Phoenix. It's a really weird ability that does loads of different stuff. First, it's a blast finisher. Second, it cleanses conditions, and not just one condition like Phoenix. This will cleanse 3 conditions from you. This won't give you vigor like Phoenix does. But this one does damage as well, almost as much damage as, say, an Arcane Wave would do. Now, it's not guaranteed to crit, but it is a fair amount of damage, especially if it does crit. And lastly, in addition to curing conditions, being a blast finish and all that stuff, it will mean you personally, any projectiles being thrown at you, again, are reflected. So it's not as strong as Swirling Winds because it's not going to provide so much support for the rest of the team, but with really clever positioning, you can draw the aggro from a lot of enemies and for 3 seconds reflect everything they fire at you. You can chain a magnetic wave, wait for that to run out, then go into Air Attunement and pop a Swirling Aura, and again still be basically invulnerable for now 9 seconds against all projectiles coming your way. That's extended even further by the skill 5 on Earth, which is Obsidian Flesh. This is like a super OP mist form, basically. This is a mist form that lasts longer and has a shorter cooldown. Only a 50-second cooldown, invulnerability for 4 seconds. Invulnerability is kind of, you know, it's got its drawbacks in PvP, at least because of capture points being decapped and stuff, but in PvE, I mean, Obsidian Flesh is great. So, even I, on the glassiest of classes, can run the glassiest of specs and the glassiest of gear. I can run into an insane amount of monsters. I can pop Obsidian Flesh. I can wait, and this is what I'm talking about with Finesse as well and Focus. Wait for it to run out, then drop your Magnetic Wave, then come into Air Attunement, drop your Swirling Winds, and then basically peel, get the hell out of there after that. But this actually enables you to have a fair amount of time to do a lot of damage and get a lot of DPS out. And to get if you're taking all the focus as well there, I'm not saying that this is a spec that's meant to be trying to tank, but if you are, for that brief moment, the rest of your team also can be dealing damage. So basically, Air and Earth Attunement really make up for fire and water, which are kind of terrible on focus. The other thing to mention as well is obviously this is competing with Dagger offhand, it's competing with Earthquake. Earthquake is nice CC and it's AoE, but again, it requires you to be close, as does Churning Earth. Churning Earth is a great, really powerful big attack, but it's got a really long wind-up, and during that wind-up, you're not really doing any damage, and you're really easy to get targeted and focused out while you're charging a Churning Earth, unless you stand way off to the side and Lightning Flash in. But then you're talking about having to wait for a utility and using up a utility slot just just to land one ability. So Churning Earth itself is limited, and I feel like for both air and earth, the abilities Focus give are way more powerful than the Dagger offhand abilities give. So, that's why I now run Focus. Those are my thoughts. Hopefully I will have had some footage of me actually using it in some fractals for you guys. Let's talk just very briefly about utilities. I don't have so much news here. I'm pretty sure I advocated the use of arcane abilities last time. I still think arcane abilities are very strong. Arcane Wave's nice because it's a blast finisher. What you can do on Focus, okay, I didn't mention this as well, but what you can do is you can drop yourself a flame wall. Like, blast finishes and stuff are incredibly powerful for dungeons and things, right? So what you can do is drop yourself a flame wall at your feet, then you can drop a Phoenix on it, you can drop an Arcane Wave, and you can go and you can grab yourself another blast finisher there on Magnetic Wave. Scepter Focus has actually got just as many blast finishers as Scepter Dagger, but it's harder to land because one of your blast finishers is Comet, which is really difficult to actually get in a field, unless you lay the field like way out in the distance and then drop it, and hopefully drop it on top of an enemy. But yeah, going back to the Arcane stuff, Arcane Wave is nice because, again, it's a blast. It's nice for might stacking. Arcane Blast is really nice because, again, it's got a lot of range. This is like the highest range Elementalist ability, 1500. Very strong, very nice. You can just sort of pepper people from quite back. What you can see, what you'll see me do is like that crab over there. You can CC, because here's the other strong thing about Fresh Air, right? I keep sort of distracting myself, but here's the other strong thing about Fresh Air. You can drop your Gale, swap immediately out of Air Attunement, like without even using any of the abilities, but then Fresh Air means it's going to be open for you again, so you can really just dart in and out, right? I love this combo of going Gale and then Phoenix and then straight back into air. It's really nice, and then you can pop the Arcane Blast too. Like, it's really cool, and that's massive AoE damage as well, that they just basically can't avoid as long as they don't have Defiant on them. So a double Arcane is still very strong. The final utility, I'm on Lightning Flash a lot recently, and I run Fiery Greatsword on the Elite. The Elemental is still a very strong cooldown, but basically the Greatsword is kind of a useless weapon in a lot of ways. It's nice for roaming, but the cooldown is way too long, so, you know, you get a little bit of mobility with it. The skill 3 hits some reasonable damage. The skill 2 is basically useless. The auto attack isn't that good. The auto attack's nice, but it's still not that great. The main reason I run it is for Fiery Rush, which if you use with someone deselected, it does like a fair amount of damage. And if you use it with Lightning Flash, you can blink on top of someone in the middle of it and do a lot of damage. Now, it's tricky. It's a massive elite cooldown and a utility cooldown to actually inflict the damage with it. And I'm not 100% sure whether it's intended by ArenaNet to be there, but it's strong. And I think it's not overpowered because it costs so much stuff to be able to do it. So that's actually why. And if you can get like an enemy against a wall, you can pop like your Fiery Rush and do a nice amount of damage. But, you know, that's coordinated stuff, and that's just one way that you can run. So that's kind of what I'm doing with my utilities there. One last thing with my utilities too is I kind of swapped my heal skill out. Originally I was on Signet of Restoration. Now that's nice on a Dagger setup, Dagger Dagger, because it's very bruisery. It's like I say, you're just running around popping as many cooldowns as possible. It keeps proccing this Signet. It keeps proccing it. And you constantly want it because you keep getting all these little bits of splash damage coming in, which you're desperately trying to out-heal all the time. On Scepter, you don't need that. Now you can run Ether Renewal, but Ether Renewal, a bit like Churning Earth, is a long channel. Even if you don't get interrupted, it's a long period of time where basically you're not doing anything unless you're popping arcane skills or your air attunement stuff, which is instant activation. So that's kind of annoying. I've actually gone back to the Glyph of Elemental Harmony. Is an ability I ran a lot back in betas and stuff, and like a long time ago, and then just kind of put aside. But this is strong for this. You know, it's a nice cooldown. If you're not expecting to take any damage, you can pop your heal skill before doing anything in fire and give yourself 4 stacks of might before even hitting someone. And you can just generally it's got some nice utilities. You can give yourself extended protection, you can give yourself extended regeneration, and it's a stronger heal. It's on the same cooldown as the Signet, but it heals for like almost 2,000 more. So it's way more useful in my opinion. Especially with fractals, Agony does a percentage of your max health, so you're going to want a really high heal that pops quite quickly. Now Ether Renewal is a higher heal even still, but it takes a long time to channel all the way. So yeah, Glyph of Elemental Harmony is a core ability. I haven't really used it much, if at all, on my videos, but it's a very nice utility there for Elementalist, and that's why I run it. I like the extra little bit of might. As I say, you know, now you can see kind of you're getting some nice might off by using all of your cooldowns. Easy 10 might for yourself and a lot of your team, and then you can just go and like spike the crap out of someone if you want. Okay, last of all, I know this is getting really long. All my build videos get really long, but last of all, this idea of precision. Last time on my video, I was talking about how I wanted really high crit damage and power, which I'm still going for, as I explained at the start of this one. But I wanted crits when I needed them, right? I wanted big... I had a couple of big abilities, Churning Earth, Fire Grab. I wanted to proc those crits exactly at the right time. And it wasn't about building high precision, it was just about getting the nice slams in. I think I was wrong there. I think I was completely wrong. After going to PvP and then coming back to PvE, fights are long in PvE. A single enemy takes ages to knock out, especially on your own, and having such low crit chance for like 80% of the time it's just bad. Like, it was feeling really horrible to me when the difference between a crit and a non-crit is about triple the damage. It felt like crap for me to come back to PvE and be seeing that I was barely ever getting those red numbers tick out, and I knew how much more damage I could potentially be dealing if I had higher precision. So I wanted more precision, I wanted more crits. But here's the thing, I didn't want to get rid of the minor defense that I've got. I'm still very, very glassy, but I didn't want to get rid of my little bit of toughness, and I didn't want to get rid of my little bit of vitality. As soon as I get rid of it, I have experimented, I just get, it sort of becomes unplayable at that point, in my opinion. Especially if you're not running like Evasive Arcana and all this extra utility stuff. So, I wanted to keep this stuff, I wanted my cake, and I wanted to eat it too. So, the way I fixed that is I've gone with sigils. Instead of running, like, necessarily, like, a sigil of Bloodlust and then a sigil of Fire to get all the Flame Blasts, all I'm running at the moment is a sigil of Force on the Scepter, which gives me plus 5% damage. Beyond that, I actually swap my foci out. I love that word, foci, I rarely get to say that. So, the first foci I run with is this X710 Alpha. It's not actually got amazing stats on its power, toughness, vitality, but this has got a superior sigil of perception, and I'll use that to stack my accuracy up. Now, just so that you guys know, my base crit chance is 20%, right? And if I was continuing to use my old sigils, it would stay at 20%, and it would be quite low. However, with this sigil, I can stack my precision up quite quickly to an extra 250. I'm going to do that now off camera so that you guys can see. Alright, so we started off with 20%. Okay, right, I'm on 25 stacks. Okay, so now I'm up at 32% already. So I've gone from 20% to 32. I've almost already doubled my crit chance, and I'll talk about the significance of that in a second. Once I've got my 25 stacks, either at that point I'll swap to my regular focus, or I will have been lazy and I already would have been on my regular focus. Now, these are the Spirit Links. These are a very, very cool focus. They're probably my favorite focus in the game at the moment. But the stats I've got on this is full Berserker. Okay, so power, crit damage, precision, and this one has a sigil of accuracy, which boosts my crit chance by another 5%. So, on my sigils alone, I have now doubled my base crit chance, excluding Fury. I've already doubled it. Now, by doubling my crit chance, I'm doubling the amount of times I will be critting, obviously, and every single one of those crits represents about triple the damage of a regular hit. So by doing that alone, by just getting rid of the Sigil of Intelligence and doing this very basic thing, I've basically doubled the DPS that my old spec would have done, like more than that, okay, if you can see that. Now, Fury does complicate it slightly. Beyond that, I then invest my food into crit chance. 40% is still sort of low, you know, for a base chance on a particularly glassy character. It will be 60 in fights because of Fury, which is quite nice. But basically what I'll be eating now is I have curry butternut squash soup, which still gives me more crit damage, but also another 100 precision on top of that. And the maintenance oil, I love these Artisan's maintenance oils. These give me precision based on my toughness, which is already high because of my accessories, and they give me precision based on my vitality, which is already boosted because of my armor. So it's perfect. It just stacks all within itself nice and neatly. So I pop that, and now my base crit chance is 49%, basically 50%, and in fights, when I've got Fury up, it's 70%. Okay, now this is significantly higher than it was before. Before, it was only 40% in fights. I've over doubled my crit chance, and every single crit itself is doing way more than double the damage. Now I'll be critting all of the time. I can easily dart in and out of air attunement as I wish with my arc lightning attack, and it's incredible. Like, the damage just goes through the roof once you deal with those very basic small things. I know this is a build kind of incorporating consumables into it. It's probably more dependent on consumables than some other build, but they're cheap enough. I kind of say, look, if you've got it available to you, then use it. And that's the way I've been running my Ellie at the moment. Incredibly damaging. It's basically got as much crit chance as someone who was on Zerks, as far as I'm aware, except I've got lots of toughness and vitality that at least help me. I mean, when you get really high-end fractals, that toughness and vitality may as well not exist, but this at least helps me for just regular content, other dungeons, other things, and it's still an incredibly damaging spec. As you can see here, with my consumable up, I'm on 118% crit damage bonus, which is much higher, by the way, because now I've got full ascended accessories, much higher than it was before. You know, this video won't have a glamorous title like, oh, 10k fire grabs like my last one did, but the fire grabs on this are like 13k now, so it's actually more damage than I was doing last time, higher spikes than I was doing last time, probably a little bit less sustained DPS, but it's got a lot stronger, it's a lot stronger in terms of positional power, and just general things I can do in terms of that. And that's how basically I'm running my Elementalist at the moment, guys. One final thing I'd just like to talk about, a couple of little alternatives, options you can go for. I never talked about these first two traits that I've gone with in Air Magic. I'm on Bolt to the Heart. Bolt to the Heart isn't necessarily the strongest thing here, because a lot of enemies, I mean, versus big bosses, it's incredibly strong, because they'll be below 33% health for a really long time, and you get a nice damage boost the whole time. But the truth is, there's not too much you can take in that first slot that's really that nice looking. I believe there's one that gives you precision based on healing power, or the other way around. Yeah, precision is converted to healing. You don't really want that. Auras, we don't have any on Scepter Focus except the skill 5, which you're just not really going to want to care about. Endurance recharges faster, or channeling, you're not going to want to care about that. Or glyphs recharge faster. No. So basically, and one with air is useless as well, because you've already got enough swiftness. So Bolt to the Heart's sort of the only thing you can take. This slot, though, you'll see I'm on air weapon skills recharge 20% faster. That's for Swirling Aura. Swirling Wind is so good, right? But it's kind of on a high cooldown. 30 seconds, I don't really like that too much. So I run my reduced cooldowns on air weapon skills, and everything benefits from this. The Gale benefits from this, even Lightning Strike benefits from this, and because of fresh air, I'm coming into this achievement so much, I feel like it really is worthwhile. If you don't want to go for that, then the other option, and you're on lots of arcane utilities, the other option is 10% more damage, 10% more crit damage after you've used an arcane skill. This is a buff to a previous trait that gave you 3% more damage for every arcane skill you used, and you had to like stack up on them. Now you just get like a nice damage boost that isn't too, you know, limiting. So now I can drop my arcane and I'll basically be doing a lot more damage in the Phoenix Spike. Only 2 of those hit him there. But as you can see, that buffs your crit damage up to 128%, basically natural, because you can stack that trait and keep it applied to you for like a long time by using your cooldowns effectively. So yeah, you can get even more damage there if you like, but I love Swirling Winds. It's so fun. So those are kind of your 2 options there in terms of that trait. For utilities, lastly, honestly, oh my god, this has been so long. Lastly, where the hell is my... There it is. Lastly, oh, you could run 10% more damage while in air achievement too if you wanted, but I would go for the 10% more damage after using an arcane ability, because then that will apply to all achievements, and it will stack with like your 10% more damage while in fire achievement, which the air magic trait won't. Right, okay, lastly, utilities, a couple of little things I'd like to mention. First of all, Signet of Fire. You know, if you want even more crit chance, Signet of Fire is cool. Don't ever use the cooldown, but the passive benefit of this was doubled recently, so it's a flat 5% extra you get. So now I'm sitting pretty on 57% and 77% in fights, with insane damage proccing off of that. 77% is very high in fights. So Signet of Fire is a pretty cool cooldown. If you don't want to be running Greatsword, you could run something like this. Then you could have your Glyph of Elementals and your Signet of Fire up, and then just not use it. The other cool thing as well that I've loved playing with recently is Glyph of Storms. This ability, when cast in Earth achievement, will every 3 seconds tick blind up. Now what you can do is you can drop a Glyph of Storms into Swirling Winds, and what have you just done? You've nullified not only all projectiles, but also all physical hits, because they're just going to keep blind. And as you can see, I'm doing damage. I wasn't even trying to kill him there, and that happened. So, you know, that's pretty fun. I wouldn't recommend using Glyph of Storms in any other achievement, really. It's all kind of naff. But yeah, those are the only 2 utilities I really wanted to bring mention to in terms of this overall build. And then, of course, there's a lot of other cool stuff. You know, I could do a whole video just on utilities and all the fascinating ways you can use them. Like, in my opinion, there is only one truly useless Elementalist utility skill. Like, really useless. Or the one at the very bottom of the pile, and that one is Signet of Water. Even this ability I used to consider was really useless, the Glyph of Elemental Power, like terrible ability in my opinion. That's insane now, since they buffed the weakness. So good. I've got a lot I could talk about in terms of bunking in PvP with this ability. It's a stun break now, it's so good. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of the video. I need to stop there. Thanks very much for watching, guys. It's been a long build video. It's not going to be as glamorous as the last one, but it's a much stronger build. This is kind of what I run in PvE now. If a lot of you are interested, if you made it to the end, thanks very much. much for watching, and I guess I will see you next time. I'd like to talk about conjure weapons at some point. Would you guys be interested in like a full video about conjure weapons and what my suggestions would be for fixing them and improving them and where they're OP and stuff? I think that'd be kind of cool. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But thanks, guys, and I'll catch you next time.